Thanks, Gregor. I'm going to dive right in on this one, Kevin, because I've been trying to follow all the information on capology and the head spinning. So how is all of this shaking out between the naming of the roster today and when the puck actually drops tomorrow night at 7?
Well, there's a lot of fluidity, in it still. So obviously, the rosters were put in yesterday, and the league basically goes through a forensic kind of accounting procedure on it to make sure that what you're submitting is cap compliant. And there's different steps that go along the way. Obviously, for us, we put Dominic Toninato on LTIR. He presented at training camp with a basically didn't pass training camp medicals, and as a result is undergoing further testing and is on LTIR for that reason. We then you make different roster transactions as you go to get as close to before putting a player on LTIR, you get as close to the cap as you possibly can. Some of that means sending players, to different places. Obviously, this year we have a taxi squad situation that is we've never had before, but you make different roster transactions and then you invoke on LTI. So today, what transpired here, we put Brian Little on LTIR, and later this afternoon we'll probably be announcing that we've agreed to terms with Trevor Lewis. So again, all these things have to happen in sequence, and thus that's the different procedures that go to place. We have a taxi squad, as I had mentioned, which will kind of be treated differently than in years past. Obviously, you get to keep players around. They can skate with you. They may skate some days, they may not skate other days. Really, it'll be just a function of how the coach is deciding to run practice, who comes out. As morning skates go, I'm sure a lot of players are going to be taking options in the compressed season. So there's going to be lots of, different movement there. And there's going to be some additional movement between, now and even tomorrow. But, the transactions will, happen as they need to.
And we'll go next to Mike McIntyre from the Winnipeg Free Press. Go ahead, Mike.
Hi, Kevin. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
Just wondering, do you envision your team carrying less than 23 players for the season, given that you will have that taxi squad here at your disposal? Was that something that will be, I guess, financially beneficial to do? And then can you just address the idea of, do you expect to see movement between the AHL and your taxi squad, that guys can sort of rotate or flip-flop from those two groups?
So the second question answer, yes, there can be movement. And the reason that there can be movement with greater ease for us is that, when the American Hockey League starts, it'll be operated under the exact same protocols as the National Hockey League. PCR testing on a daily basis, all the different protocols that are in place in the NHL documents are going to have just switch them to AHL and for us Canadian teams. So because of that, we'll be able to move players between the American League and the taxi squad with greater ease than if we were not doing that testing. And it's going to involve air charter as well for our teams when they go. So it's a very expensive proposition in order to ensure the the integrity of the protocols, and to make sure that out of an overabundance of caution that everybody is maintaining a safe environment and certainly ensuring that they're not a threat to anyone in any community. So actually ask your first question again. I forgot it.
Yeah, and just the idea of carrying less than 20.
Oh yeah, 23. Players. So we're in a little bit of a different situation. Once you're in LTI, and if you are in LTIR and you're not going to be below that threshold of essentially 81.5 of what the actual cap is, you're not going to be accruing any cap space. So, when we put Brian Little's 5.2 million on LTIR, that should essentially be, the space that we have moving forward, but it doesn't grow. What that cap space does is you can replace players or add players up into that number. So essentially, if we want to run 23, we can keep 23. If we want to run 21 or 20, we can. A little bit of a function of it will be with, younger players on the taxi squad. You're going to, you may take them on the road because you want access to them, if you're on a longer road trip. Or you might send them down, when you're to the Moose when they're here, so that they can play. So I do anticipate, some movement in that regard, and some of it will be related to making sure that players don't sit out for a long period of time. And then, again, you have to be on the 23-man roster in order to play a game. So the taxi squad is not eligible to play a game unless they are part of that 23-man roster. So that then all the rules that applied in the past are still there. Putting a player on IR, the player, must be out for 7 days. So, given the climate, that we're in, you're going to see a lot of things, happen this year, and you're going to sit in there in the stands and question why. And you're going to come and ask, Paul, well, why was this player out? And you're going to get an answer some days of basically it was due to CPRA. And what's CPRA? Well, CPRA is COVID protocol related absence. So there's going to be times, out of an abundance of caution, say a player comes to the rink and has the sniffles. Well, he's going to get tested, temperature checked, tested, and sent home. But then there's a protocol that's going to have to be followed after that. And there's not going to be a time frame that is essentially attached to anything, in that protocol. It's all going to be testing related. So there's going to be lots of questions that a lot of you are going to have, whether it's to Paul or to whoever. And basically, that's going to be the answer, that it's a protocol related absence. And there's not going to be a time frame that's going to be given. I do think what's going to happen, though, is that the NHL is going to be keeping a master file of that, that you as media will have an access to, I believe, and to kind of keep track of that. But it's really done, and all these protocols, and when you really get into them, it's really done out of an abundance of caution, and not necessarily if a player is held out of a practice or is gone for a period of time, did that person test positive? What it might mean is that you've had to have gone through some sort of protocol to ensure that it is not COVID. So you're going to need that taxi squad. You're going to need your 23-man roster to be flexible. And you're going to have to be nimble with it. The good thing is we have salary cap space, to be able to do that.
We'll go next to Ken Weeb from Sportsnet. Go ahead, Ken.
Afternoon, Kevin. Paul Maurice said earlier this week in camp that it's not a young team anymore and that you're in performance mode. What can you share with us about what you see as the strengths of the team and also the internal expectations for the group?
Well, internal expectations are obviously very high, and internal excitement is very high. I think it's the whole hockey industry has been put on pause and on hold, and the whole world has. And we're just excited and feel very fortunate that we get an opportunity to hopefully provide some level of excitement to to the fans and become a distraction in what's a very, very difficult time. I think as far as our team, obviously, your main strength starts when in net, and Connor Hellebuck putting up a Vezina trophy winning season last year, and I know. He's really driven, to try to achieve something even more than a Vezina, and that's a Stanley Cup. And when you have a player like that, that's, the anchor right there, then, you've got a good basis. I like, the different look on defense. I think that we talked a lot about our penalty killing and hoping that some of the additions can help, that improve in that area of the game. And then I look at just again, and I've said it over the different years, like, every year you get a year older. Well, our players that have grown up through our system are a year older. They're that much more mature. And again, one thing that the long off season did, I think, was allow them to, to continue to work on their bodies. Whereas sometimes, that, maybe wasn't the case, in a normal off season. So we're excited to get started. It's not going to be easy. This is, this is a division that I think will create a lot of excitement amongst hockey. Certainly there's going to be a lot of attention paid to it, being a, in the passionate hockey market of Canada, and I think it's that excitement level that is going to drive everyone.
We'll go next to Murat Atesh from The Athletic. Go ahead, Murat.
It's a big day for you, Murat, right? Cap day.
Absolutely, tripping over myself to try to
Nice.
understand. That's what the question is going to be about.
Okay.
I apologize.
We studied hard for it.
Is my understanding that the timing of LTIR in doing Toninato a day before Little is really quite the move in terms of maximizing LTIR's space for you guys, and that this will help you get almost all of, if not all of, Little's space used. Are you able to explain how that works?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So say you add up all your contracts and you're at 81.7 million. Well, you're 200,000 or 300,000 over. So 81.8, say that you're $300,000 over the cap, and you have to find a way after you've, either, assigned guys down or didn't, called guys up or whatever roster you wanted to submit. So if you have players that do go on LTIR, like Toninato, you then invoke. It's called invoking it. So at that point in time, you invoke it, and you're allowed to go up to what his number would have been. He makes 700,000, but when you're invoking, if you're below, all you can capture on that day is getting yourself to the cap. So when we invoked with Toninato, you are essentially back at ground zero. You're able to submit a compliant roster, but you do not have any more LTI space available. So at that point in time, our roster is compliant and we are at zero. So then the next day, we invoked on Brian Little. So we go from zero to an LTIR space of 5.2 or whatever his cap space is. And then, you go from there, you operate in the season after that. So timing, is very important. It's something that, I think you've seen a lot of that, in the league this year.
We'll go next to Paul Friesen from the Winnipeg Sun. Go ahead, Paul.
Hey, Kevin. This season, of course, is kicking off against the backdrop of quite the social upheaval. The NHL became quite vocal in the calls for change in social justice in the spring. In fact, your captain, I think, was the first player to speak out about that. Why do you think hockey people have been so reluctant to speak out about what's happening now?
Well, I guess I don't know. You'd have to, I guess, ask each and every individual, because I think when it does come to politics, when it comes to religion, when it comes to a lot of those things that you don't really talk about at family gatherings, it's everyone's personal opinion, I think. And I think that's some people are more free to share their opinions, and some people, are more reluctant to. And I'm not sure if that's a sport related or if it's just an individual person related phenomenon.
We'll go next to Sarah Orlesky from TSN. Go ahead, Sarah.
Kevin, you may have answered this a bit with Ken's question earlier, but just when you've been watching training camp as a whole, I mean, we know where obviously the strengths of this team lie most, but what is it that stood out to you most about your group heading into this season?
I like the experience factor of it. I think, up and down the lineup, adding, Trevor Lewis here, at the end, and Nate Thompson. I think you've got two experienced guys that have experienced a lot of success in their career. Obviously, Lewis, winning the Stanley Cups, like those are things that, again, I know when you have those experiences and you can bring them into a locker room. players gravitate towards that. I think you see, you're going to see players asking, it's kind of like the scene from Bull Durham when they're at the back of the bus and they're asking about, like, you played in the show, like you won a Stanley Cup. Like, those are the things that drive players, that create excitement and help build the team camaraderie. So again, I think adding that experience, having the hunger, of the players that I know that we have, having the talent, that these players, do possess, and just knowing the work that they put in the long off season. Again, I think when you don't have something, you learn to appreciate it a little more, and not having a traditional kind of start to this season, I think, has helped each and every player just understand how fortunate they are to play at the National Hockey League level.
We'll go next to Jeff Hamilton from the Free Press. Go ahead, Jeff.
Kevin, thanks for doing this. Just, obviously with COVID-19, people have been forced to adapt, whether that be professionally or personally. I'm just curious, as the general manager of the Winnipeg Jets, what have you noticed as far as your job? How has COVID-19 affected you? And where do you expect the biggest challenges to be doing your work this year with the global pandemic?
Well, I think you're going to see just challenges from my perspective in multiple different areas. I think that, you saw it yesterday with respect to the waiver claims, with respect to transitioning players across borders and having quarantines and planning, for that. I think that, simply just calling a guy up when you're on the road somewhere, it's going to matter whether he travels commercially or whether he's going to travel on a charter. Because he travels commercially, he's potentially unavailable to you. So a lot of logistical things there, and that's on the roster side. On the planning side of it, it's very difficult to know exactly where things may or may not go with the draft. From a scouting perspective, an amateur scouting perspective, and building your franchise, for the future, you're certainly concerned when it comes to the draft and being able to evaluate and make proper decisions, because those have long and far-reaching effects. And even from the pro scouting standpoint, will it be a lot more video? Will there be, some in-arena access? If you've got a scout in Canada, you're fortunate. If not, you're probably looking to hire one. Those are things that, from a logistical and managerial perspective that, you're on. Plus, you learn a lot about protocols. There's the protocols come out from the National Hockey League. They're very, very thorough. And then they'll change, they'll adapt, or they'll make an addition based on, best practices or recommendations. So you have to then spend the time to go back over all those protocols, and make sure that, as an organization, you're compliant, because the number one thing, and Gary Bettman has said it many, many times, the number one thing is the safety of the players and staff and the community.
Just time for a couple more. Let's go next to Ted Wyman from The Sun. Go ahead, Ted.
Hi, Kevin. I was just thinking about the Mathieu Perreault situation being put on waivers. I was just wondering I'm not going to go as deeply into the cap stuff as Murat does, but
yeah.
If you could just explain why it was necessary or why it was beneficial to you to put Mathieu on the taxi squad and pass him through waivers. And then what does that mean for him going forward? Could he be in the lineup, right? Because he's obviously been practicing on the line with Thompson.
Yeah. So part of, what Larry Simmons and I, kind of do on a daily basis, certainly leading up to yesterday, is you're putting different rosters, you're putting different scenarios and situations up on the board to see if you're cap compliant. And with a player like, Mathieu Perreault, who had a $4 million contract, we decided that it was, worth the gamble to put him on waivers so that we could gain, and in his situation, a player that makes over 1.075 million, that's what you would get off the cap. So a player like Mathieu Perreault, when we put him on waivers and sent him to the taxi squad, we were able to deduct 1.075 from our salary cap number. And so 3 million and change, was still on our cap at that point in time. But the $1 million, coupled with Lucas Biza potentially being put on the taxi squad, and his 800 would get us to the numbers that we needed to get to today. Well, I sat down, Paul Maurice and I sat down with Mathieu and explained it to him and told him what was happening and why it was happening. And it's not a fun conversation, but in the same token, that's the business side of it that needed to transpire yesterday. And Matty was fully on board and said, I'll do whatever I can do to help this team to make sure that we have the most flexibility as possible. If we couldn't have gotten to make the roster moves that we had, we would not have had Brian Little's full LTI money, and in fact, we might have been hamstrung in order to have to only play with a 23-man roster and not have that cap flexibility that we did. So, my hat goes off to Larry Simmons, who again does a lot of the heavy lifting on this, and fortunately in my past life, I had to be the guy that made sure we were within a couple of bucks of the cap when I was with Chicago. So it's there's a lot of little intricacies that go into it, but you need to have someone that understands it very well, mapping out the process.
And final question goes to Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet. Go ahead, Sean.
Hey, Kevin. Patrick Laine had just said, regardless of everything that's going on, he's going to be here and putting 100% in when he's on the ice. It would seem in similar situations in the past, players like Evander Kane, Jacob Trouba, that's happened as well. What do you think this organization has done well to get players who maybe have situations away from the ice that leave them unhappy? What has the organization done well that's allowed those players to, once they get here, to still integrate in the team and with the team and give their all on the ice?
Well, I think I said it before. I think it's all because of they're professionals. There's the business side of the game, and then there's the the professional side of the game, and they're professional athletes, and they know the importance of where it's at. So I expect nothing less from every single player that when you strap the blades on, you're a professional.